Welcome back to Brass Tactics, your one-stop shop for your foreign policy, military, and tactical strategy needs and wants or sometimes irrelevant tidbits that might make you seem smarter the next time you're at a party.
Not to mention ill-placed opinions and facts that I'll have to retract in the next episode because I remembered them incorrectly.
I'm your host, Joe McGiffin, and with me is your co-host, Pete Mitchell. Pete, how are we doing today?
I'm doing okay. I think I'm fighting a sinus infection, though. How you doing?
The struggle's definitely real here, too.
Back to school means back to being sick.
And we're definitely not recording this right after we recorded last week's episode because we're adults and we can manage a production schedule.
100%. In fact, I know what time it is.
So last week, Pete, we talked the Kursk offensive. Previously, we've talked a lot about drones, but we haven't really focused on the actual air defense platforms either. And the air defense platforms, more so than the drones, are really what's kind of dictating the shape of this war, if you don't think about it too hard.
I'm trying not to.
So I kind of waved us off. Is that an air term? Getting rough. I told you to circle around one more time when we were going to talk air defense last week. So bringing it back to the Kursk offensive, can you tell us a little bit about how air defense has sort of shaped what we've seen of the Ukrainian strategy with this offensive?
So we've actually seen some pretty interesting things. I saw a video of a Russian Ka-52 scout helicopter being shot down by a Stinger, of all things, at pretty darn close range. So obviously the Ukrainians are bringing up, that's a man-portable air defense missile, by the way.
Yeah, but the other fun fact with that is how old is that bad boy?
It's a block. It's probably from the early 90s, most likely, because we sent the oldest first, and it's a Block 1 Stinger, at least from what I think. So it's probably from 1992 or 1993.
34 years old, it still works.
It's almost as old as us, and it's still kicking. I mean, and bodes well, man. Feels good. Feels good to be a 90s kid.
Like technology. So does that imply air defense technology has peaked?
No, not at all. It just means America didn't do anything to improve our man-portable air defense systems while other countries did.
Well, it sounds like we didn't need to.
Mm.
You didn't just watch a Stinger not shoot something down, did you?
Okay, yes, but it could have probably been from a longer range. And if it had missed, it would have been a really lousy video. We wouldn't be having this conversation now, would we?
Yeah.
Sometimes you get like, okay,
America.
There are things you can improve, especially with the Seeker warhead, like we did itself with the Stinger Block 2, right? We made it not only infrared, but it can also see in UV. So it's a dual Seeker, ultraviolet. So actually it's pretty cool. It can see reflection of like moonlight or other ambient light off of the metal parts of the aircraft, as well as its heat signature, which is really cool. Makes it harder for it to be fooled by flare or chaff. Kind of works against both. No. So it's not that man-pad technology has peaked, although I will admit there hasn't been any groundbreaking innovation in man-pad technology for like 60 years. I can't even think of. They basically have just gotten lighter, I think, and slightly longer ranged and more capable.
I mean, but that's pretty much how most of our technologies developed in the 80s, 90s eras.
Yeah, it's really the same. I think the batteries, like the Stinger battery, is the biggest pain in the rear end. It only has a battery. It has a very short battery life, so you want to put it in basically right before you're able to shoot it. That's a bit of a pain. It'd be really nice if you could kind of leave it all in all the time, like a laptop, and just pop it up when you're ready to go. But whatever, that's neither here nor there. It does need to work very hard because it has to cool down the Seeker in the nose super fast. I think it uses argon or something, but it basically kind of turns it into a little freezer so that when it opens the Seeker warhead, it's very cold, so it looks for the hot things. It can see the hot things really easily. Sorry, that was a bit of an odd tangent. The other problem with it wasn't so much that the lack of innovation on our part, it was the fact that we just stopped making them, like full stop. In the early 2000s, we just stopped making Stinger man-pads because we didn't think we needed them because we were in Iraq and Afghanistan and they don't have the aircraft. And there was no need to continue stockpiling them because we weren't really expending them except in training. So we just stopped making them. They only
Yeah, I mean, that
recently
makes sense.
restarted.
That makes sense too. It's impressive that the basic technology is still relevant these days because it's not quite the same as like 155 rounds we developed in the 90s, right? Like that just
Mhm,
sits there, and that just as long as you keep the powder dry, it's just waiting its turn.
mhm. Yeah, with solid propellant for missiles and rockets is a little more finicky. You have to be careful when you have to be carefully inspect them after they've been in storage for a while. Because if
Oh,
you have
I'm sure.
because if cracks form in the solid prop, it'll blow up. That'll kill you. That's how I think the guy who basically invented proper solid propellant for rockets, I think his name was Jack Kearney. Really weird dude. Got into some occult stuff. This was back in the 50s. He blew himself up experimenting with like a weird blend of like creosote and hydrazine, just evaporated his basement. Sadly, a lot of rocket scientists ended up that way.
Well,
Yeah,
someone's gonna do it.
yeah, crazy times. Anyways,
But anyway, so that man, since we might as well just start with what toys do we have since we're on the subject. So the Stinger is a man-portable air defense platform or man-pad.
yep, and
Uh,
the Ukrainians
and
have
the
those
smallest.
along. Sorry for interrupting. The Ukrainians have those. They also have the Polish Piruns and Pyrons, and also the Brit Starstreak, and
All of
the
these are man-pads.
and these are all man pads, and also the French Mistrals, I think they're called. Um, there's a French German one that's also used. But yeah, they have a potpourri of man pads, and they're all basically the same. It's a
And
tube your back.
this is pretty much the smallest thing they have to plink things in the sky with.
I wouldn't call shooting a multi-thousand-dollar missile at a helicopter
Oh,
plinking,
I'm not saying they're
but
not expensive. I'm just saying the tags only go up from there, correct?
yeah, I mean, if you want the dirt cheap stuff, it's guns, right? So like the Flak Panzerkampard that they have, which is a 20 millimeter radar guided uh, explosive little shell that they shoot out, or even dudes. I've seen guys with Maxim machine guns on the back of trucks. Like we're talking like 1905 vintage machine guns with large, anti-aircraft optics on them, so they can try to shoot down drones. Because you can use those to shoot down drones. I would not take a Maxim machine gun against a modern attack helicopter, but it'll definitely work against a Shahed 135. So that's your cheapest stuff is just bullets. Higher than bullets, if you're getting to smart things, radar guided 20 mil shells out of Flakpanzers or PVAD Vulcans if they had any, but we don't because we gave some to the Israelis. We didn't give any to the Ukrainians. And then you have the small missiles, the man pads. Then you move on from there.
Have we given them any other assets that they're using? Or more importantly, what other air defense assets do they have?
We have given them, I believe they now have 2 American Patriot batteries and a German battery. And I think they're going to get an additional German battery soon. I think, if the Germans can scrape it together. And a Patriot is a kind
Pretty
of a
much
medium,
iconic, I'd say.
it is iconic. It's a medium range air defense system. It can engage pretty much anything short of longer range ballistic missiles. So it can shoot short range ballistic missiles, pretty much any air breathing threat, which is a helicopter, a cruise missile, or an aircraft, or an airplane, or a drone. It can engage all of those pretty comfortably, and it's designed to do that. And
So
we also have given them some MEAD systems, medium range air defense systems. I think they came from the Swedish, and then an Iris T, which is another. It's very similar to a Patriot. So they have a handful of these kind of floating around. On top of that, I'm sorry, they have the Soviet stuff, the old Soviet, stuff. So they have Igla man pads, Strela man pads. They have a bunch of different weird vehicles that you can strap Strelas and Iglas on top of. They have some Shilkas, which are radar guided 30 millimeter anti aircraft guns. They have some Tunguskas, which is like that, but you put Strelas on the side of them. They have some Buks, which are medium, kind of like a Patriot, but worse. That was the thing that the Russians used to shoot down the Malaysian airliner over eastern Ukraine back in 2014. Do you remember that?
yeah,
The one that didn't disappear. Was that
right.
Mi-17? But yeah, that was shot down by a Buk. And then they also have the S series, and they have S300s, and I think they also have some. They don't have any 400s because those are Russians, but they have S300s, which are larger than the Buk. and also larger physically than a Patriot. So they have a longer range, I think, than the Patriot, but the radar is not as good. So they have a ton of air defense systems. Just an incredible. Their logistics must be it's like the German army in 1943 or a Confederate cavalry regiment in like 1861. Like the logistics of keeping all these different calibers, vehicles, and armaments together. It must be insane because now the Ukrainians do a good job of this because they do have brigades that are like just have Western stuff. I think it's the I want to say the 82nd Air Assault Brigade. I think that's what Matt was telling me about. The 82nd Air Assault, they only have like Bradleys and Abrams. So like they have American stuff. And so they have it like kind of condensed that way. I would assume they also keep their air defense regiments in the same way. Like this air defense regiment just has American, like, or as the Patriots, like Patriot, 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 and then try to keep the logistics relatively consistent that way.
Did we give them anything bigger than the Patriots?
No, the only thing we have bigger than a Patriot's a THAAD, and we're not giving those away. Those are way too valuable.
Well, then what's a phalanx?
The phalanx Seaways close-in weapon system. We gave some of them to them too, didn't we? They're Gatling guns. They are Vulcan. Or sorry, they're not Vulcan. They are phalanx Navy close-in weapon system Seaways. It's the same model that's on every U.S. Navy ship, but it's adjusted to be able to fight on the land. So we call that system CRAM, Counter Rocket Artillery Mortar. I don't know if we gave them any phalanx. I don't think we gave them any. I'm not aware of any CRAMs being donated to the Ukrainians. It's against the Russians, CRAM is of very limited utility. It's designed to be put on a FOB in Afghanistan and to shoot down mortars or rockets that are being shot from relatively close range at relatively low velocities. It's not designed against anything bigger than that. It would do great against drone swarms. It would do actually fantastic against those, but it would do very bad if there was a ballistic missile heading towards it.
Gotcha.
And also, I don't think we have enough. Again, it goes to the THAAD thing. We only have a couple of CRAM battalions in the active army, with a few in the National Guard as well. They're expensive systems, and they're also a bugger to maintain. They chew through ammo. Obviously, they're Gatling guns.
Okay, so with this constellation of air defense platforms, how has the air defense function of warfare shaped this war and specifically sort of dictated the strategy of this Kursk offensive that we're talking about?
I think that artillery in general, because I don't think you can take air defense without its bigger sister field artillery into the equation, because they work together in Ukraine in a way that's just absolutely insane. And because together they take a lot of what we would do with our Air Force kind of out of the equation. And it prevents both sides from using their post-Soviet Air Forces effectively. The field artillery with modern long-range precision munitions like HIMARS and then also ATACMS has pushed where you can put an airfield so far back, right, that you have to keep the aircraft hundreds of kilometers away from the front line now to keep them safe from getting blown up in their hangars. And additionally, air defense has proliferated. This is the other thing too. So you now have air defense. It may not be a Patriot, on every single, regimental sector, but you'll have something there, even if it's just a couple of privates with a Strela manpad or something to keep you from bringing helicopters up, and something from keeping you from flying fast-moving close air support aircraft at will over your front line. So even the fear and the threat of all these air defense systems, and this is on both sides, by the way, because the Russians have tons of air defense, absolutely tons of air defense, because they've been doing nothing but building that since the 1950s. And that's why kind of the Ukrainians have such a crazy mixture. There's so much air defense on both sides. And the artillery on both sides is so long ranged and so precise that it is the only things you can push up to the forward line of troops are dismounted infantry, right? Because on top of that, now you have precision anti-tank guided missiles. You have these drones that are essentially acting like precision anti-tank missiles, by the way, but you can deliver them from a much further way, like much further distance. It's stretching the line horizontally, the battle space horizontally and vertically, and it's preventing air bubbles from being made. Well, sorry, air superiority bubbles from being made. It's creating no man's land bubbles in the sky. Does that make sense? You cannot have this air defense in this war without the artillery supporting it. It's not possible. That's kind of my point.
And so as a consequence, nobody's able to really maneuver in what we would consider a combined way, a combined arms maneuver. You're talking you've got close range, close air support like helicopters and things flying overhead. You've got tanks and Bradleys, armored personnel carriers moving in conjunction with dismounted people. And you cannot achieve the unity of effects that you want. All of that would be supported by artillery fire, indirect fires. But they're just nobody's able to achieve this level of unified action to dominate the battlefield because the air defense air one like these man pads, they're ubiquitous now. And
Yes. They're behind
they're
every bush.
they're so cheap compared to the cost of a helicopter and the cost of a fighter jet. It's just not worth risking those platforms. But they're also most of the time more expensive than a lot of these drone platforms still, or
Right.
roughly the same, to the point where you don't want to waste those munitions because you want to reserve a lot of these munitions for those those better targets, those helicopters and those planes. And so instead of these sophisticated platforms flying around, we're seeing a whole bunch of drones and a whole bunch of dismounts.
Yeah. And and again, just kind of like tack on to what you were saying, you can get some limited effects, like the Russians in the Donbass axis, or as the Ukrainians are achieving in Kursk. You can get a limited success with surprise and then concentrating your forces, but notice how limited the advances are, because you can't outrun those bubbles. You can't outrun your artillery or your air defense bubbles, uh, or you're going to get ripped to shreds.
Yeah, if we were to, I'm not sure that all the details are available, but in breaking down what Ukraine had to invest into this Kursk offensive, right? Massive electronic warfare equipment, which is one of those really highly prized assets on the battlefield, because that's one of your biggest defenses against drones is just disrupting the connections that they have with the user end.
Right.
So they had to invest in electronic warfare. They had to bring air defense with them so that when those other helicopters and other things start coming for them, because the other bad part is, right, the worst part about a drone is being seen by it. I mean, the
Yep.
FPV drones are a super nasty flying IED wings of ruin travesty if it's coming at you, right? But if a drone spots you, like Pete was talking about with in the military community, or at least in the army, we call it the king of battle. Um, field art, your artillery, like that was the first thing somebody decided to use a drone. It's the first thing people used hot air balloons for, and the first thing that airplanes were adapted for.
Right.
By spotting bad guys so that you could use your artillery on them. And so you need that electronic warfare and those air defense capabilities, not just to keep the jets and the helicopters out now, but they have to keep the drones far enough away that this massive combined arms thrust and hold into the Kursk region wasn't going to get obliterated by indirect fire before it was able to make momentum.
Right. And again, you're also seeing the limited advance the Ukrainians did when the Russians began trying to rush convoys of troops in trucks down the Kursk highway towards like the gap to try to fill it. The Ukrainians already had those roads dialed in, observed by drones, and just dropped HIMARS on them safely from back in Ukraine. Right. So they advanced up to a point, stopped, and then hit the Russians as they were coming down to counter them. It was I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it goes to show you can't move outside these bubbles. You have, like, in this current, and okay, again, this is between two post-Soviet armies. They're artillery focused, right? They know artillery is the king of battle. Americans like to forget it sometimes and talk about infantry all the time. I really, like, I would not want to be an infantryman right now in Ukraine. I wouldn't want to be an infantryman ever, to be honest. But the poor bloody infantry are the ones who have to stand out, hold the terrain with their bodies, essentially, to maintain this kind of thin barrier in the middle, the infantry on the infantry, while the artillery and the air defense seek to kind of any kind of advantage, right? They look for any kind of advantage to hit each other. And the hunter killer game plays out in these rear areas where you'll have the drones scouting for the enemy air defense, for the artillery to hit it, right, with the HIMARS, or possibly send a drone after it, but it's usually outside of drone range. So you have to be constantly moving and camouflaging your air defense systems. You have to be constantly moving and camouflaging your artillery systems because both sides are actively trying to hunt them out and destroy them.
Yeah, I think I want to amend our analysis from the previous episode, Pete. I think that with this wedge versus hedge strategy, on top of that, I still think that one of the things we're going to see is starting to see a little bit more probing and a little bit more maneuver from the Ukrainians. But
Mm-hmm.
I would submit that this might have been also among its other goals. I think one of the side objectives of this push into Kursk was a proof of concept. How do you take this new air defense laden paradigm of conflict and fighting a war and make it mobile, make it maneuverable,
Mm-hmm.
translate it into an offensive? Because air defense, I mean, it's in the name, right? Defense.
Yeah, it's an inherently defensive system. You can't use it offensively. It doesn't work like that. I mean, well, kind of. I mean, the
But
Ukrainians they've done a
yeah,
couple
but
things where like
exactly, that's what
they'll
I'm saying.
leapfrog a battery forward and shoot a long range attack. But that's again, it's not. It's reactive. It's reactive. That's how it works.
And that's why I think one of the side quests here is they're trying to work out new SOP, new standard operating procedures, a new actual air land battle doctrine, if you will.
Right. And it will have to be. I feel like it'll have to be largely autonomous, like drones that can operate without communication from their operators.
And that is if we add to the list of cocktail convos or
Ding!
what we're gonna see, we need a more convenient way of brass tips. Nope, don't like that one.
No, we can't say that.
Anticipations.
Anticipation station? No. Conjunction junction? What's your function? I like cocktail combo. There's nothing wrong with that. Just have the clinking of glasses whenever we say it. You need a fun sound effect.
So the cocktail convos specifically when we're using a buzzword or a new thing out of military nerd dictionary, right?
Yeah, right.
I'm trying to pick like something like we'll say on like a brass trademark. I don't know. Some sort of brass forecast type.
Brass forecast. I like that.
Brass our brass forecastics here, right? I think that's exactly what we're going to see next, Pete. I think the next micro generation of drones are going to have humans further outside of the loop. Some sort of thing, some sort of algorithms running it that you give it enough direction and it's able to continue its mission after it's been jammed.
Right. It has to.
Yeah, it's the only way. And in the meantime, Ukraine is probably going to try another technique, another probe like this, just to continue testing out like how effective is this? Not only where else are Russian troops vulnerable because of underfunding, undertraining, underled, but also how effective can this complete and utter synthesis integrating the air defense into the offensive be? How far can they push before they've truly made their line of communication, their resupply routes way too tenuous?
Yeah.
And I think that's all we got for this week. Looks like we're wrapping up roughly right on time. This has
Yeah.
been a good
It's a
one.
shame. It's a shame Matt wasn't with because Matt could have freaking helped me out with all the stuff the Ukrainians have because I know I'm leaving off a few things that they have in their arsenal. They've
I
gotten it from
I
everybody.
I think me and the rest of our relatively uninformed audience members have probably gotten enough.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
sorry. Boring them to death with all the acronyms.
I mean, most of it was good, but then every Russian word sounds the same, and we're all basically just wishing that they were Toyota Hiluxes. Anyways,
Absolutely.
we don't have a topic picked for next week, so you all are our 7 to 11 audience members, given which week it is. Why don't you go ahead and write to us and let us know what you want. You can write to me directly. You can hit us, slide into our Insta DMs on at Breast Tactcast at Breast Tactcast. Or yeah, just leave a note on Spotify or wherever you are listening to this publication. Please give us a like, a follow, or subscribe. Every little bit of attention helps. Pete and I exist off of external validation only, and also
It
if
hurts so much.
if this podcast ever reaches a point of sponsorship where I'm at least not losing money on paying for the editing software, I would consider that a major win.
Yeah.
So, thank you for listening to Brass Tactics, and we hope that you'll hear from us next week.
Bye.